Okay. And I love when technology works. I always say that, but in this day and age, um,
True.
when it works, it's awesome. So I just want to
Yeah.
say hello to anybody who's watching. And if you're watching the recording, this is Priscilla Ron. I'm the vice chairman of the Colorado Republican Party and a full-time teacher in Denver. And I'm so excited to have this open chat with my new friend, Mr. Terris Todd. Hello, Terris.
Hi there.
Hi. So real briefly, Terrace and I met a couple of weeks ago in Denver when he flew in from DC, and we met at the Western Conservative Summit. And he was part of a 4-person panel talking about critical race theory and education and all. He said so many inspiring things. I had to get to know him better, and I am so glad that I got to learn a little bit more of your story. And I thought more people need to know who Terris Todd is. So, Terris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history and your work experience?
Well, again, thanks for having me, Priscilla. It is truly a blessing and honor to be here with you today. When I came out to Denver, and it was so cool because you didn't pause at all. You came right up to us and introduced yourself, and I love that kind of a spirit. In other words, it's a blessing to know you. So I know you were blessed to know me, but I'm blessed to know you as well. But so anyway, thanks for having me. Again, like you said, my name is Terris Todd. I was born and raised in the city of Battle Creek, Michigan, where my family currently is. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, was raised by a single parent, a single mom. Um, and my journey is quite unique. When I graduated high school, my first journey into college was at Norfolk State University, which is an HBCU here in Norfolk, Virginia. And then from there, I transferred back to Michigan and I obtained my Bachelor of Science degree in education from Western Michigan University. And then I also obtained my master's degree as well from Western Michigan University in educational leadership. And so along that journey, I mean, somewhere along the lines, I've sat on several different boards and different committees locally in the city of Battle Creek. I've sat on foundation boards. I've sat on other committees and stuff like that. I've sat on boards to launch, small credit unions and stuff like that. But then some way, somehow, someone tapped on me and asked if I would be interested in running for a political seat at the county level in Calhoun County, Michigan. And so I said, well, let me pray about it. Me being a man of faith, I said, let me pray about that. So I got with my wife and my bishop, and we talked about it. And then I ended up getting back with the gentleman because what was happening was he was resigning from the board because he was getting married and moving out of the area. He was moving to, I think at that time, Indiana. And then from there, he went on to Illinois. But so anyway, I went ahead and agreed to run for office because I knew that me being in education, me being in local leadership on different boards and stuff like that, I said, well, hey, why not? So once I got involved, he then introduced me to some individuals in the local Democrat Party at that time. And so that's how I got involved in politics, because even prior to that, I was a civil service commissioner for the local fire department, where we, hire and promote firefighters and stuff like that. And so anyway, it was truly an honor. I hadn't been involved in politics at all. I hadn't, gotten involved in, any kind of partisan kind of an activity. I was just a local guy, was proud and blessed of the Lord to be working for the Battle Creek Public School District as a teacher, 6th grade teacher, as a matter of fact, which everybody says, huh?
What subject did you teach?
You know what? When I first started, see, Battle Creek Public Schools had not moved 6th grade out of the elementary building yet. So I taught my first 3 years in an elementary building, but it was cool because I partnered with my colleague, my coworker, and so I did all of the science and social studies, and she did all of the math and English, as core subject areas. And so, but then once they moved 6th grade into the middle school, Then I taught social studies for the remainder of my time teaching. And then from there, then I went into administration. So I only taught sixth grade for 6 years total. And then the other part of my career has been in administration. So it was quite interesting because when I look back over my journey from the educational standpoint, you know, working in the public school district, I had been on every level of education because later I landed in a adjunct position at the collegiate level, and so it's been quite the journey. But with that being said, going back to the political piece, once I was serving as a county commissioner, somewhere midstream, I would say about year 5 out of my 10 years as an elected official, I then began to understand that, wait a minute, something's seriously wrong here. Because I started to realize that my values and what I believe and how I was raised, they truly did not align with where I was at. And so I was kind of conflicted at first. And I'm like, wow, this is interesting. So I started paying attention to different policies and the actions of different political figures at the time, the president, everybody. And so I'm like, wow. And so what ended up happening was I ran for a position at the state level. I ran for state office for state legislature in 2014. And I was in a 3-way primary, and I came short in that primary. And as a result of that, interestingly, I ended up coming back as a write-in candidate because I truly believed it was what God had called me to do. I'm like, okay, it's not going to be easy, but let's go right in now. And so then I'm getting these emails and people contacting me. Oh, you got to get out of there. You know, you're going to split the vote. And I hadn't, truthfully, I hadn't even thought about that, but I didn't care at that point because I was mainly focused on what God has called me to do. And I knew that God had called me to government. So anyway, long story short, I ended up pulling out of that race probably about a week or two ahead of the general election that November of 2014. And interestingly, the Republican won that race that year. And it was a predominantly Democrat seat, but the Republican won that race. And 5 days after that election, he called me up. And I went to his home and we sat down and we had a conversation. And he asked me to go and work in the state capitol with him. And I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I think it'd be great. I think it'd be a great representation of our district, you know, because it was mainly like a 55%, you know, left, you know, leaning kind of a district anyway. But he thought it would have been a true representation of our district. And so I said, well, let me pray about that, you know. And so, long story short, again, got with my bishop and my family, and my bishop said, "Why not?" And he said, and eventually what's going to happen is, he said, you're going to end up putting the R behind your name because that's truly where your values are. And I was like, wow. So, and that's it. That's eventually what ended up happening is that, once I worked in the state legislature in the state of Michigan, the whole time I was there working in the House of Representatives, I then started meeting a lot of people, and they embraced me, man. They embraced me with open arms, with love, man. And it was truly a love fest for that entire. I think I worked there. Yeah, I was like there for 9 months, no, 10 months, and I'm sorry, 9 months. And so what ended up happening is right before I took another position to be the director of a Head Start program for community action of South Central Michigan, I then ended up officially on paper making my shift to the right and align my values up with where they truly belong and where I believe that most African Americans' values truly are today. You know, they just don't know it because I didn't know it. And so interestingly, I took the job at Head Start, and I was the director for like 4.5 years. And but in 2019, this is really catching, and I know that you find this story very intriguing. But in 2019, I got a call from a young lady by the name of Camilla Prince, and I'll keep saying her name because she kind of opened this door. And she was saying that she had my resume and she wanted to know what my interests were. And so I called her back. She worked with the RNC. I called her back and I said, "Okay, this is Terris Todd. I'm returning your call. And what do you mean? Like, you have my resume and what now?" And she said, "Yeah, I just want to know what your interests are." And I said, give me an idea. What do you mean? She said, are you interested in working with the Small Business Association? Or I said, yeah, that'll be cool. You know, so I'm just going along with this thing, right? So, and then I told her, I said, well, you know, I'm an educator by profession. I said, maybe the Department of Ed. And I said, maybe HUD, you know, Dr. Ben Carson from the city of Detroit. I'm from Battle Creek, Michigan. Yeah, I wouldn't mind hanging out with Dr. Ben Carson a little bit. So she said, okay, well, Terris, I'm going to take this down and I'm going to forward your resume over to the White House. I said, are you serious? And she said, yeah. And then I asked her before we hung up the phone, I said, let me ask you this. How did you get my resume? And she said, honestly, I don't know. And I said, well, praise the Lord. And so she started laughing on the phone. I said, and then she said, no, honestly, I don't know how I got your resume. And I said, wow, I know how you got my resume, because 7 years prior to that, my bishop, Bishop Hugh Smith Jr., he's the presiding bishop over the Jabula International Network. He prophesied to me about 7 years ago and told me that the Lord was sending me to Washington, D.C. And I said, okay, Bishop, all right. He said, no, I'm serious. He said, you and I are going to look up one day and we're going to be having lunch in Washington, D.C. So when she called me and all this stuff started rolling, I'm like, okay, this prophecy is unfolding. So that was September 2019. January, fast forward, of 2020, I get an email from the White House. And it was with the presidential personnel staff, and they were reaching out to me because they had my resume. And they sent me some forms, and I filled those out and whatnot. And then lo and behold, long story short, fast forward, February of 2020, I was invited out here to a Black History reception at the White House. It was really cool because I met a lot of wonderful people. Dr. Carson was there. Herman Cain was there. It was a lot of people. I had the pleasure of meeting the Kevin and Keith Hodge, the Hodge twins, the conservative twins on YouTube, which I'm cool with even to this day. As a matter of fact, Kevin just texted me yesterday and said he bought 2 copies of my book, my newly released book. And I said, oh, wow, that's cool. And so I met all these wonderful people. So the president comes out, he greets us, and he welcomed us to the White House. Very kind. You know, it was, like I said, it was a love fest, man. I mean, you know, the cameras were all behind us and everything. And so I'm like, man, this is pretty cool. And so when I fly back to Michigan, and the White House personnel staff reached out to me again, and I'm sitting in my car and I'm eating some Wendy's. And I looked down at my phone and it said, oh, Washington, D.C. I said, oh, man, I gotta answer this phone. And so lo and behold, it was them. And they said, you know, the reason why I'm calling is because we want to bring you on the team. I said, are you serious, man? And so I said, wow, I'm like a kid in 5 candy stores right now. And so he started laughing and whatnot. And I said, well, wait a minute, what's the position? I was just so excited. You know, here it is. I'm getting a call from the White House. Little old me, born and raised in the city of Battle Creek, Michigan, the youngest son of a single parent, you know what I mean? And so, you know, being from a single parent household, all the statistics are against you and, you know, in life and stuff like that. And so here it is. I'm getting a call from the White House. And so he said, you're going to be the executive director for the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African American students in the country. I said, wow, are you kidding me? And so that's how that happened. So May 5th of 2020, I got sworn in by the White House to fulfill that role at the Department of Education here in Washington, D.C. And June of 2020, as a matter of fact, June 15th, I moved into my place out here, and the rest is history. And so I'm here now. And then once that all was coming to an end on Inauguration Day, January 2021, that was my official last day at the Department of Ed with the previous administration. And then, but prior to that, I was blessed and honored of God to be called by the Heritage Foundation, where I am currently today, by a lady by the name of Angela Saylor, who is my vice president of the Foner Institute, where I had the blessing and honor and privilege of representing them out in Denver, where now here it is, I'm meeting you. So it's all a wonderful story, but I know that's a long kind of a thing, but I want you to go ahead and have an opportunity to ask me any questions that you want.
Sure.
But that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's a lot more, I'm sure, but I'll give the floor to you now.
Yeah, no, that's such an amazing Cliff Notes journey.
Yeah.
You know, when you're trying to give such like there's so much information in your life. And, you know, you started out by talking about your civic engagement in the community. And
Yeah.
you know, that's where a lot of people start, where they're volunteering, or they're part of a
Mhm.
foundation, or they're part of their PTA or
Yeah,
HOA or something. Like, people don't realize how important that beginning is, and how we learn about our
true,
duty.
true.
And that's how you start to build relationships and
That's right.
prepare you to run for actually an elected position in
Mhm.
legislature. And so I want to tell people who are watching, like, if you want to have an impact in your community, you don't have to be
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm going to run for like US Congress to try to make a difference.
Right.
You can run for city council or school board or commission.
Yeah.
If you were, and I was appointed this year to serve on the Douglas County
Mhm.
Planning Commission. So I wasn't elected, I was appointed, and I'm learning so much just about land and
Yeah.
water and building and zoning. It's amazing how our government works, but you don't have to have a ton of experience or
Right.
a ton of relationships or a ton of money to get
Right.
involved, because you will start to have those doors open. Just like in your situation, it looked like
Mhm.
people got to know you, you learned
Yeah.
more, and you applied yourself. And so I want to go back to your story of your mom and being, you know, the third son of a single mom. And like
Mhm.
you said, that's the statistic, right? So we know prior to the civil rights movement, only
Yep.
20% of homes were of a single parent home in the, you know, but prior to the civil rights movement. Now it's
Mhm.
70% of Black children being born to single parents. So what was the difference for you? Tell me a little bit more about your story there.
Yeah, and might I add, I neglected to share this too. When I made my official switch politically to align my values up with where they truly belong, once I did that, a year and a half later, um, I had people coming to me and saying that you would make a great vice chair, and
Oh,
I'm like, what? So and so now keep in mind, this was interesting to me. I'm like, okay, after a year and a half, now I'm being approached to be to run for vice chair in the state party. So of course that convention broke out. I'm running, and lo and behold, I'm in a three-way race again. So and so thanks be to God that the awesome delegates of the state of Michigan voted in support of me being one of their vice chairs. I was one of five. There's five of us, and I was one of them. And I was truly blessed and honored. And I served 2 terms. As a matter of fact, right after I came here and got sworn in by the White House to serve in my capacity, I looked for someone to fulfill my seat because I was in my second term at the time, and I didn't want it. I didn't want that to go vacant or unfilled. So I found an awesome young lady by the name of Jamie Swafford, who was willing to step up and really give a jab at it. And she did a wonderful job. She made me very proud because I was very active and I was all over the state of Michigan. I'm at meetings, I'm at events and different things, and I'm being asked to come and speak at different events and stuff like that. And so that's exactly what she carried on that, you know, and so I was blessed of that. But getting back to what you were saying now, what made the difference, I truly believe it was God. I do believe that God's grace on my mother's life was tremendous. You know, to raise 3 boys on your own, and none of us be, um, you know, our lives were never really endangered, or we're not criminals, you know. And so I truly believe that it was really the grace of God that was on my mother's life. But also, what makes the difference is a decision. You know, they say life is about choices, and what you do with your life plays a key role. Like you said, it started out with civic engagement, and here at the Heritage Foundation, we're doing just that. I mean, that's what I love about what we're doing here at the Faulkner Institute. One of the programs that we're heading up is called Level Up Civics. So it's returning civics education back into, you know, the families, back into the home, so that children and, you know, parents can actually have a talk of civics at the dinner table. You know, so this program is developing now, and we're going to have a website, and people will get resources and stuff from there, and tips on how they can actually restore civics back into their households and back into everyday conversation with people all over the country. And so that's one program that I'm really happy that we're doing. And so, because that's how I actually got my start, and you're absolutely right. You don't need a lot of money. You didn't need that. And interestingly, when I was tapped to run for county commissioner, um, prior to that, like you said, you were appointed to that. I was actually appointed as a civil service commissioner for the fire department. So it wasn't an elected position, but I had to leave that to get into the elected position. And it was all new territory for me. But me loving and caring about people, uh, it made the difference. It was just part of what I do, part of the very fabric of who I am. And so I had to have some determination as well. Even though being raised by a single parent, it's not doom and gloom, but I know the statistics and the data that we see each and every day and each and every year when they come out with the data. I know it looks kind of gloomy and dark, but when you're raised in a home, man, and you sense the love and the support from your parent, even though it was just one parent, but I had some awesome grandparents too around me. I had a grandmother and a grandfather around me, and I had a relationship with my dad. He just lived in Detroit, so it was like an hour and a half away from east of Battle Creek. But I had a relationship with my dad, so I would usually be in Detroit on like weekends or spring breaks or summer breaks or whatever. So I did have some kind of relationship with my dad. So I don't want to make it seem like, dad just went off on his own thing and totally neglected the fact to acknowledge me as a son. No, he was very proud of me. And as I got older, my dad and I got closer, and then once I got married and started having my own family, we really got close. And then he ended up passing in 2009 because in 2000, my grandmother had passed in Georgia. And so he just moved back home and lived in the home there. And so my father ended up living the last 9 years of his life in Georgia, Hawkinsville, Georgia, to be exact. And so, but he and I, he would call me I'm like, you weren't calling me in Detroit. Now he's calling me. So I was really happy about that, because he now sees me as a man, but I'll tell you what was a pivotal point in my relationship with my dad was when I drove all the way down to Georgia, 14 hours away to Hawkinsville, Georgia, little old town in Pulaski County, Georgia. And I sat in his living room, took my wife, my wife was expecting my second oldest daughter at the time. We had our oldest daughter. So I made that 14-hour journey, sat in his living room there, and I told him exactly how it made me feel, that he was not a part of my everyday life and that he had missed my junior year in high school, the parent night when you walk your kids out onto the football field and they announce your parents' name and stuff. So he failed to show up. And I told him how that made me feel. Now, mind you, at that time, I was 30 years old when I had that conversation with him. And I tell you what, that was a pivotal moment because 3 years later, my father ended up calling me. I mean, we talked since then, but one call he called and he said, you know what? He said, remember that time you sat in my living room and you told me this and that? I said, yeah. He said, man, that really messed me up. He said, man, and then he started asking my forgiveness, apologizing. And keep in mind, Priscilla, I'm on the other line, on the other side of the phone. I'm crying like a 5-year-old boy. I'm like, it's all right, Dad, But and I told him I forgive him. And like I said, he's 21 when they had me. And I understand, people change, people grow and they develop, they mature. And who am I to hold that against them? I know forgiveness is very powerful. And that's exactly what I had to do. I had to forgive my father. And lo and behold, it led me to write a book. And so now the recent book that my newly released book called Just Being There, A Parent's Guide to Raising Children, that was part of my journey as well. It had something to do with me encouraging people to just be there, and so now I look at my daughters, my 3 wonderful daughters, man. My wife and I have not had any issues out of our girls whatsoever. They're all National Honor Society students. They're good Christian girls. They acknowledge God. And I've never had to discipline them harshly. You know what I mean? Never had to. My oldest daughter, she's a junior at Michigan State University studying to be an OBGYN because at the age of 5, she said, I want to help mommies have babies. I said, well, praise the Lord. Matter of fact, on my lapel, one of my lapel pins is little baby feet. I got that from a pro-life organization in Battle Creek called Alternatives Battle Creek. And so it's the size of a 6-week-old baby. And so I wear that on my suit lapels all the time because I'm a pro-life gentleman. I believe in life. I believe all life comes from God. And now that my daughter wants to help mommies have babies, I'm like, that's a beautiful thing. And so, my second oldest daughter just graduated. She's headed to Western Michigan University, where I got my degrees from, and she's going to study political science with a minor in business and psychology. And my youngest girl still has 2 years left of high school, and where she's going to study eventually software engineering. So I look at that, and that's all an encouragement. And I'm like, man, the Lord has really blessed us, because this story could have been a lot different. According to the statistics for people being raised in single parent homes. And you pointed out the data that prior to the 60s, African American families were more intact, even during slavery and stuff like that. They were more likely to be intact by 80%, and so I think a lot of what's going on today in our world today, a lot of the ills and challenges that we're seeing today, I think a lot of it is a result of broken families. I mean, there's a direct correlation with that. I don't care. And it's sad, because a lot of our politicians are not even making that fact. They would rather talk about what divides us and tell you all these lies and talking points, that's doing nothing other than driving us further apart. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the advancement of Black people whatsoever. All of this other stuff means absolutely nothing. Let's talk economics. Let's talk about, putting and positioning all of us as Americans. Let's talk about what's going to help us all leverage the ideals and possibilities of us all leading a life of success in this country, because the opportunities are here. That's why we have so many people coming, because they know, so while we're doing all this inward fighting and all this other nonsense, and people got agendas to divide us, these people are coming into our country saying, hey, you guys want to take advantage of the opportunity, we will. And that's why our wonderful brothers and sisters from Nigeria are doing excellent. They're doing very well academically. They're doing well business-wise. The Asian community is doing well. I mean, all these people are doing well. But yet they want us to be stuck back in time talking about racism. What? It does nothing for us whatsoever.
You're making so many great points. When I listen to you talk, I actually kind of hear my father speaking, because I think, well, here's the parallel that I see. You are a godly man. My father wasn't always, but he did come to know the Lord as an adult, and I see the change in our family. And he's still married to my mom to this day, and we all know marriage is not easy. So when I see couples that have been married for over, 55 years, like my parents, it's such a testament to their resolve and their commitment, and how he raised me. And I told you I'm the youngest of 6. So I have 5 girls and 1 boy.
Oh, wow.
So it's really a testament to this formula. Like, we know that if you graduate from high school, just graduate from high school, get a job, and don't have babies before you're married. Those 3 simple statistical can change our community. And it's going to take examples like you, and examples that we're seeing. There are other gentlemen that, beat the odds and said, I'm not going to be a statistic. The statistic I'm going to be is that I'm going to be about making good choices, because that's the one thing America affords us in the Black community, is the ability to make choices. There's nothing that keeps you and I from making money, being an entrepreneur, getting an education, being creative, going as far as because we see so many examples of not political people who have made it successfully. So yeah, I love the fact that you have that testimony as a man of God, and that you are instilling that narrative, because my father never raised me to think that I was oppressed or less than, or that white people are bad or anything like that. So if you don't instill that negativity into your children, you speak life into your daughters to be strong, independent, successful, vocal, confident women. So that's
and if I may, real quick, Priscilla, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think I think these other conversations and there is a dark underbelly in this country that seeks to, again, like I said, divide and conquer. And quite frankly, I think a lot of what's happening now, I think it definitely cheapens and it lessens the impact that African Americans have had in this country for many, many years. I mean, we certainly have a dark past. Slavery was absolutely horrible. Slavery took place all over the world, and United States of America were not the first ones to enslave Africans. You got to do your research and figure this out, that some people were enslaving Africans centuries before this happened. And that doesn't excuse what took place. But my point is that you have people that make it seem as if like our nation or our country is the only one that has had the horrible past of enslaving people. And, when people really do the research and they really find out the history of slavery and how it was actually all over the world, it was in South America, it was in the Caribbean, it was in the Middle East, it was all over. And unfortunately, it was legal. That's the sad part, and so you're absolutely right. I mean, when I think about all of this, we cannot allow for that to happen. The beautiful thing about our Constitution is that our founding fathers with the Constitution has allowed us to right our wrongs, because we've been able to make amendments and, and make progress and stuff like that. I mean, that progress has been very slow, but at the same time, it is progress. But there is a group on the earth, or there's a generation on the earth today that seeks to drag us back to that. But my generation, I'm 48. So my generation and below, and my daughter's generation, they're like, wait a minute, we love each other. We've just moved on with our lives. What are you talking about? Go back to marching and we shall overcome and kumbaya and what are you talking about? Like, it has absolutely nothing to do with that. And like I always tell people this, there's a conversation around systemic racism. Now, Jim Crow was very systemic. We know that. That was systemic. But when you look at today, first of all, we have more African Americans in elected positions than ever before in this country. Then my question would be, then why are we still in the same position? Mm-hmm. Because just because you have elected officials in position that look like you, that doesn't mean change. I pointed it out when I was in Denver, for example, okay, let's talk systemic racism. Okay, my question is, who's controlling the system? Because when we look at cities like Detroit, one of my favorite cities, keep that in mind, still got family there. Detroit is 79, 80% Black, but they have a white mayor. So are we saying then that they just elected their oppression? Look at Baltimore. We know the story of Baltimore. A lot of African Americans are in leadership positions there, but look at what's happening there. So we can't keep playing these games and having these political talking points about this group is racist, this people, is, voter oppression. I mean, do you know how bad it demeans us to say that we can't get an ID to vote? That's some crazy stuff. You know what I mean? It is very subtle. And I think a lot of our people that say they're woke, they're really sleepwalking, because that's not woke at all. It really cheapens and it makes us look like we are inferior. And so that's why I don't necessarily ascribe to this supremacy conversation. Why? Because if I ascribe to that, that would mean I also ascribe to the fact that we're inferior to them. And I'll tell you this, nobody is superior to me at all but God. And so that's the message that I think a lot of people now who are truly, woke, they understand that. They truly do, because you can't make sense out of how do you have cities that are being predominantly run by African-American leadership, and yet they're in the same position. We got to start telling the truth. We got to stop lying. One brother from Detroit, there was an attorney there, and I remember he told me, he said, Todd, he said, the enemy's in the mirror. And I sat and thought about that. I'm like, wow. And Michael Jackson says, I'm talking to the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. No message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. Why? Because people who are the same skin color and even darker than me are doing very well here. So if it's systemic, then how do they get there and we don't? No, it's all about choices, man. Life is about choices. And I refuse to allow for the same rhetoric to go to the next generation and have them thinking and believing that the white boogeyman is coming to get them and that they're inferior and that they're less than, when that's far from the truth. Far from the truth, man. And so again, like I said, because of the founding documents, our Declaration, our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, all of that, it allowed us to right our wrongs. That's a beautiful thing. And my thing is, I had the pleasure of speaking down in Raleigh, North Carolina at a rally there. And I joined with, I think it was Education First. It was a group out of North Carolina. And 2 weeks on the job, I'm asked to speak at this rally. I'm like, oh, they want me to speak? I'm like, okay. So we go down there and I literally told them, I said, listen, you guys, I said, listen, you gotta ask yourself the question, who's really got an issue? Because if I'm in a nation or a country, or if I'm somewhere that is working day in and day out to adamantly be opposed to my success, why do I stay there? You know what I mean? I mean, that's a legit question. Like, why do I remain? It's almost like staying in an abusive relationship. If I realize that I am somewhere that is totally against me making progress and my children and stuff like that, then I am held accountable by God to change my situation. because it's not true. They don't believe that. Just like I was telling you about Detroit, 79-80% black, but you got a white mayor, and you're saying we got to deal with systemic racism. Well, ask the question, then who's running the system? Because when I look at the school board, it's all black. Matter of fact, all black females. I mean, so are we saying that essentially our black sisters are setting our kids up to fail?
You're making,
and that's another thing.
Yeah.
What's that?
No, you're making so many great points about what I call like the soft bigotry of low expectations and this deficit mindset that we don't know as a black community how to get on the computer and figure out where to get a vaccine shot, or we don't know how to access information, or we don't know how to get an ID, a free ID. I mean, I can't fly on a plane.
Free.
I can't even show up to school in my building without my ID. Is that racist? Is my school district racist? Because I can't get in the building without my key card. So, but why are we allowing as a black community, BIPOC community, to let the left dictate to us that having one vote per legal citizen, because you must be, the law says you have to be a legal citizen to vote.
True.
But now we're being told that we're racist for making sure that we have a system that is legal and that reduces fraud. And I'm not talking about the election. I'm just saying we have to have confidence in our elections. And one way we can do that is to agree about making sure that we are following our own laws. So
yeah, I agree with you. And really, I've spoken with some pastors and some different community leaders and whatnot. And it was a beautiful conversation because they asked the question. They said, who do they think it's going to hurt the most? I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, everybody knows the answer to that question. It's going to hurt predominantly African-American communities. If we do not secure an election by proving that you are a legal citizen of this country, what is wrong with asking for us to have that? I mean, it's just like school choice, right? So parents should have a right to decide where to send their kids to school. So why does big government want to come in and take that right away? Why? Because they're trying to appeal to their funders. That's how that works. They're trying to appeal to those who pad their pockets during election time. When in fact, a lot of them don't send their kids to neighborhood schools. And that's it. There's been a study on that, and we hear it time and time again. So it's very hypocritical. It's hypocrisy at the highest level. And but again, parents should have a right to decide where to choose or what's the best fit for their child, whether that's homeschool, whether that's a faith-based school, whether that's a public school, whether that's a private school, whether it's a military school, whether it's whatever. They have a right to decide that. Why? Because they're the taxpayer. So at Heritage, we're excited because a lot of these parents are standing up and they're going in and they said, oh, not on our watch. You're not going to just keep trying to indoctrinate our kids with this nonsense, especially when you look at some of the data on, third and fourth grade reading proficiency and math. the math data. Okay, so we have an issue with that, but yet you want to talk about skin color? Really? I mean, we got to get our kids to be literate. You have people in this country that are graduating high school that's reading at a third and fourth grade level. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, but yet you want to talk about skin color. Really? Okay. Yeah. All right. So thanks be to God that we have parent groups all over this country. And like I said, here at the Foner Institute, we're absolutely excited about it because they're going to school board meetings, they're holding school board officials accountable, and they're taking charge back of their kids' education, which rightfully so they should be doing. And I've always believed that, even when I worked in the public school district, I mean, I'm a school choice kid myself. My mom chose to send us to a neighboring district other than the district we lived in. And so thanks be to God that we have some freedom loving Americans who are fighting to keep that in place. Right. So as a matter of fact, I told somebody recently, I said, let's not forget that Black folk in this country at one point didn't get a choice. So now you're saying all that Ruby Bridges went through and all that the civil rights people went through, getting cracked upside the head and, getting houses bombed and, all this other stuff, lynchings. You mean to tell me that was for nothing? Come on, man,
I need to interject here. I need to interject because this is one of my biggest pet peeves with my Black students who come to class and they say, Miss, can we not do anything today? I don't feel like doing anything today. And if there's any Black parents listening to this, I need you to have a conversation with your children about the importance of education and the history. If these parents are talking about, well, we got to teach our history, teach that slaves were beat. They were not allowed to learn how to read because education was the key to freedom.
True.
When your children today who have a free education, they have a teacher who's helping them to be successful. I would not allow my children to go to school and say, can we do nothing today? Like, what would you rather trade your life for right now? What would you rather be doing than being in school right now? So that's something, again, that we have control of in our community. But I want to quickly go back to your story because I'm very curious. When you said you ran as a Democrat for a state Congress,
yeah,
and the winner was a Republican who called you and wanted you to come and be a part of his team.
Yeah.
What was it? How do you think he won in a district that leaned left? That's my first question. And number two, why did you say yes to him?
Well, first of all, it was because my life is not my own. I get my instructions and I get my marching orders from the Lord. I mean, that's just case in point. I mean, I prayed about it. My bishop, who's always been my father in the gospel, my wife, I consulted with her. It just made perfect sense. It was an opportunity. It was an opportunity of a lifetime to take my career to the next level. As a matter of fact, I ended up being the first from the city of Battle Creek to work on that level. And keep in mind, I confirmed this with a lot of the elders in the town in Battle Creek. I'm like, has there ever been anybody Black from Battle Creek that's worked in the state legislature at the state capitol and stuff like that? They said, no, not that. And I'm asking people that's like 70, 80 years old. Like, no, not that we can think of. And then later, keep in mind, God, again, remember the prophecy, that God was sending me to DC. So all of these stars had to line up, and so then to be appointed by the White House, like, oh, wow, now we're really saying something, So I think that was what really caused me to say yes, regardless of what other people were saying around me, because it just made sense. It was my life. It was my relationship with God. And I didn't back down to that. And so, but that's why I said yes. And now I thank God that I did, because keep in mind, had I not made that shift, this wouldn't be possible. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you had I not made that, and so sometimes God will move in our lives. Remember, his thoughts are far above our thoughts. His ways are far above our ways. And so I had to understand that sometimes when the Lord, people sing that song, Lord, any way you bless me, I'll be satisfied. But you're going to put the brakes on because it's a political thing? Like, no, absolutely not. If this is how he blesses me, then I'll be satisfied with that. And as a result, I went over and I switched, and I went ahead and went to work in the state legislature in Michigan. And I met a lot of wonderful and awesome people. Even when I was vice chair of the Michigan Republican Party, I met a lot of awesome people, man. I mean, like people were loving on me, people that were truly concerned about what my next move was going to be. Terris, how can we help you? What are your goals? What are your plans? And I just kept believing God and telling them, I'm like, I believe that God is sending me to DC. I believe God's sending me to DC. And lo and behold, they get to be a witness that I was believing God for it, and now I'm here. And so one of the things that I will say is that although he was Republican, he was also by profession, he was an ear, nose, and throat doctor. His name is Dr. John Vizon, who's now currently our state senator, and my wife works for him in the state Senate. So, and what the formula to him winning was he built relationships. He sat down with people. He met with pastors. He was genuine. Matter of fact, a lot of people said, man, I wouldn't vote against him. He's very genuine. He calls us. Matter of fact, one pastor came out, African-American pastor, at his 10th anniversary and told his whole congregation at the dinner, he said, I don't usually get involved in politics or whatever. He said, but I'm endorsing this guy because he said, I've never had a politician call me and ask me, what can I do for you? I mean, just something that small literally changed his life and changed his view on, I guess, political parties or, so it made them open their eyes to the person. And so, and then his second term in the House of Reps, I mean, he ran up against a viable candidate on the left, and which that gentleman is in that seat now, but even he beat him the first time around, and he won it by like slightly over 200 votes, but still it's a left-leaning seat and he still won. And I truly believe, had I not been on that side with him, as well as another friend of mine named Dave Morgan, who's running for state representative there this next term around, had we not been there and built these relationships with him, he would not have been reelected, and he'll tell you that to this day. And so as a result, he not only did 2 terms in the House of Reps, he went on to be our state senator, which he's currently now our state senator, like I said, where my wife works at now. And we truly believe he's going to be reelected again because he's a good man. He's not the type of person that starts playing these political kind of things, but he's a good person overall. And he's very genuine, and people love that. So that's how he was able to win.
I love that story because I've experienced some similar things here in the Colorado Republican Party where, I was kind of new on the scene, and then all of a sudden people just started wrapping their arms around me and wanting to know more about me and just encouraging and building me up. And I see that so much within the Republican Party. There's this stereotype of who we are as conservatives and Republicans, and when people like you and I live in this I call it this ecosystem, right? We're like, wow, this is so different from what we see on the media of the narrative of who we are and who other Republicans and conservatives are. They're very loving, caring, open, Big Tent, when we talk about independence, and they really do want to know your character. They don't care about our skin color. They want to know what we believe in. And that's where, once they get to know what we believe in, and we're like-minded in our love for America and our support for the Constitution, they're like, well, then you're part of our tribe. If that's what you believe, you're one of us, and we love you despite. And so that's the beautiful part of inviting people to come and just take a look at what we stand for. Because like you said, so many people in the Black community have conservative values.
They do. They are
breaking it down, and it's like, but then you got to vote your conviction and your values. That's all we're asking for. Is like, vote your convictions, your values, because these are important things for our society and our community.
Yeah, good point. I mean, vote your conviction and your values, and don't vote for just the sake of voting. Vote because that's what you really believe in. You believe in the person. You've done your homework, and also hold them accountable. You know what I mean? Because sometimes people just say what you want to hear, and then they get this, their head swells up, and then lo and behold, they forget who they're representing. They're representing a population of people who they told these are their beliefs and values. And so you got to hold those people accountable. And the thing I love about the Heritage Foundation is that, again, we're forced to be reckoned with here. And my transition from the previous administration to Heritage was seamless. It was a beautiful thing. It was a continual love fest. I mean, I get here, I'm being embraced. It's a nonpartisan foundation. Got to put that out there because they really are. They're willing to work with anyone who loves our country, period, and who wants to also embrace the principles of what makes us great to begin with, you know. And so that's what I love about Heritage. I mean, the people here are good Christian folks, and we all work very well together, and we love our country. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is just a continuation of what I was doing previously. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, when I first made my shift years ago, it was literally a love fest. I mean, I was embraced, and I just recently got asked, you know, a few weeks back. Matter of fact, when I went back home, they was like, "Oh, they're not racist." I'm like, "No." I said, "Well, let's keep in mind my experience back in Calhoun County. Let's not forget, I'm a former NAACP president of the local branch. You know what I mean? So, and when I stepped away to run for state representative, I was getting calls about the left and how they had buttons of Obama portrayed as a monkey. So go figure that. So let it rest on that. So I'm thinking about, okay, so now what are you guys going to do to hold them accountable to that? You know what I mean? That, you know, and so like I tell people all the time, racism or bigotry is the condition of a person's heart. Has absolutely nothing to do with whether you're right or left or whatever, because there's some wonderful people all over this country, but there's also some horrible people all over this country too. It doesn't matter the skin color, it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter anything. There are just some horrible people in this world, and there are some really good people in this world. And so that's the beauty of freedom-loving people like ourselves, where we can come together on some common ground of shared values and beliefs and principles, to make for sure we push back against that other nonsense that's trying to divide us today. And so, so this journey has been quite interesting to me. I'm sure there's some stuff I'm leaving out, and I'll get off this show and it's like, man, I should have said that. I should have said that. But
and we'll have a part two.
Yeah, we'll have a part two someday. But no, I really appreciate it.
Well, I want to get some of your wisdom because we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Your time at the White House, focusing specifically on African-American students, is really important. So, you know, we both have in common in education. We were both administrators. I was a principal, you were a principal. So this work around, when we look at the data, and we see that a lot of our children in the Black community are not showing mastery of literacy and math. What advice do you have to all teachers currently in the system of public education, or any system, private, parochial?
Yeah.
How can we start to change this narrative? And it could be specifically about education, or it could be directed to the families. What is your advice? What would you like to see?
You know what? Thanks for asking, because this is definitely a lane that I love to be in. I always say, you know, parents, start early. You know, you got to start early. I mean, you can't wait until the kid is almost in driver's training to now want to start educating them on stuff. You got to start early, man. I mean, you know, a child in the womb, that's why we believe in life, right? We believe that life begins at conception, and a child in the womb, they say that a baby starts learning in the womb. Read to them while they're in the womb, you know, all of that. And so, and then you'll see this natural progression. But my message to teachers, I would say this: if we as educators have believed, and, you know, we always say that, you know, we all believe that all children can learn, and they learn different ways, you know, they learn at different rates, right? Well, if that's the truth, then why do we give the same test every time? Why do we give the same test at the same time to every child? If a child learns at different rates and at different ways. So that's still to be, you know, questioned. As a matter of fact, real true educators that want to see kids be successful, in my opinion, allows them the opportunity to enhance and to improve. It's not a one and done. You know, we're lifelong learners. Then why do we cut them off? If we see that our kids have actually failed a quiz or failed an assessment or something like that, then why do we just let that be? Why don't we come back to the kid, maybe reteach it, rethink it, sit down with them, give them a better understanding or whatever? But how about we allow them to continue to improve on that assessment? You know, people who just shut them down, it's almost like you're setting them up to fail. I mean, it's almost like you enjoy them failing. You know, it's about mastery. You want them to learn because they're a reflection of you, whether you know it or not. I always told my students this: when you're successful, I'm successful, period. And they understood it. They felt Mr. Todd's genuine love and concern for them. As a matter of fact, I was honored earlier this month on the 11th to be invited to the class of 2011's class reunion. And they invited me. I was like, wow, that is kind of shocking that, your former students want you to attend their class reunion. But they told me, they literally said, Mr. Todd, we love you, man. Thanks for supporting us. You've always been good to us and this and that. And that really touches my heart, man. And so, but you'll be amazed at just treating people right and working with families. I mean, one of the things that we're pushing here as well is the transparency of schools. How is it that these other curriculums and other ideologies are sliding into the schools and the parents aren't even aware of that? Mm-hmm. So parents, I don't let them off the hook totally, but if it's a true partnership, you would think that parents would be at the table and explain, hey, we're thinking about implementing these things into the school. This is what we're learning, mom and dad. This is how well our kids are doing or whatever. No, but parents are forced to actually go and search for that stuff. If we want to know how our school districts are doing, you got to look all over the place for the data to see how they measure up to other schools, to see how they measure up to other students. Why is that? Why isn't it just transparent? So that shouldn't be that way. And quite frankly, that there's a lot that should be done with that in that regard, and parents should not tolerate that. So my message to the public: stop putting all this pressure on teachers. Guess what? They belong to families first. Education begins at home. We're asking teachers to be Superman. You struggle with your 1 or 2 kids at home, maybe 3, and yet you're asking me to wave a magic wand for 25 in my classroom, different personalities, different backgrounds, different neighborhoods, different situations, but yet I'm supposed to perform a miracle, and all these kids are supposed to be, scientists and, taking us to the moon all of a sudden. So anyway, all I'm saying is that they have to be a little bit more caring, a little bit more kind, a little bit more understanding that you have 3 kids you're raising. I have 25 in my classroom that I'm trying to make for sure that educational excellence is at the forefront of everything that we do here. And so if you're concerned, mom, dad, or whoever, guardian, grandparent, or whoever, how about take some time off and go help that teacher in the classroom? I mean, that's an idea, and ultimately failure should never be rewarded. We shouldn't reward failure. Everybody has different outcomes and stuff like that, but failure should never be rewarded. But yet we should pay attention to it because it is a reflection of, to some degree, of what we've done or how we've actually applied, the curriculum and their grasp and understanding of that curriculum. So I used to always have data conferences with my teachers and say, okay, well, tell me what this data tells me. If you got 30% of your classroom failing, what's your plan to resolve that? We're saying no child left behind, right? We don't want nobody to walk out of here failing. Well, then what's our plan to resolve this a number of failures? So I used to always have them actually put a plan together on how they were going to address getting those students back up to mastery, right? So that's what we're all about.
That's that critical thinking, problem solving character that we really need to focus more on with our children.
True.
We spoon feed a lot. I feel like we over scaffold information with our children to where they don't get to struggle that much, and
Yeah.
struggling a little bit mentally and problem solving is a really smart way of teaching kids how to be resourceful and how to figure out the answer and to push their thinking. And but I feel like we got to this point in education where we over support and we coddle. And of course the majority of the education system is led by women, and our nature is to coddle and help and put band-aids and rainbows and clouds over everything when the men are just like rub some dirt on it and walk it off. We need that balance of energy in our school systems to say, hey, listen, we don't want you to struggle to the point where you quit, but it's okay to not have the answer right now. It's okay to think about it, and it's okay to we're going to teach you how to figure it out so that you can think. And that's what I'm seeing a lack of in, I've been in education 27 years, and I've seen a lot in 27 years in education that has me concerned about the
Yeah.
resolve and the ability to manage emotions and the emotional IQ of
Hmm.
adults, young adults. It's a big concern. And I'm seeing that perpetuated because we have more and more and more kids, receiving counseling. It's like, what,
Yeah.
it's overwhelming, the depression and how kids are
Hmm.
just feeling. And and look, I don't want to be misunderstood about where I am about social emotional supports, because it's critical. But what people don't realize is the overwhelming amount of children who are battling emotions. And so it tells me
Yeah.
we've missed the mark somewhere
Hmm.
about teaching, grit. And you have people on one side of the aisle say, oh, you can't just talk about grit and like pull yourself up and like work hard. But those were the values that you and I grew up with,
Yeah.
and they're important to be able to go, you know what, maybe I made a mistake here, maybe this wasn't a good day, or maybe I
Yep.
failed at this, or I made a really stupid decision, but tomorrow's a new
Hmm.
day. I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to get up and I'm going to try again, and I'm going to be a better person. And those are the types of resolves that we need to teach these kids these days, because otherwise, where are we in the world ranking? I'm not sure. We're what, 17 in the world in our K-12 education, or
I think
somewhere
so. Yeah, somewhere around there.
something like
Yeah.
that. So there's all of these countries ahead of us in public
Hmm.
education. And it's embarrassing as America. We say we're the greatest nation on the earth. I mean, I kind of believe that in a lot of ways, that we're an amazing, amazing nation. But how are we so low in our public education system compared to other countries? It gives me pause. And so I'm going to give you the last word here, as we
Hmm.
sign off. And I do feel like we're going to have a part two. We're going to have to bring you to
We are.
Colorado for sure. But I'm going to give you the
Yeah.
last few words.
No, thank you very much again, Priscilla. Thank you very much for again having me to come on and kind of talk about my journey a little bit. Like I said, here at the Heritage Foundation, specifically in the Foner Institute and our team here, we take this the American founding. We take the principles and values of America very seriously. Again, we acknowledge the fact that we have a tattered past, we have a dark past, but yet uh, uh, our present and our future is we desire for it to be brighter. Because why? Because we live in, like you said, the greatest nation on earth. Why? Because we have opportunities to change. Our founding documents allow us the opportunity to right our wrongs, and so that's the beauty of America. And again, that's why so many people are uh, uh, really fighting to get here. And those who actually come, they know the truth. They not only know it, they experience the truth about the great opportunities that they have here in this great nation. And so we're here to defend that. We're to defend it to the end, and so if I were to say anything is that I want to make for sure that people understand, like you mentioned something earlier about balance. Children need a balance at home as well. We know all too well that they need a father and a mother in their lives. That's just a known fact. I shared some statistics recently at a local church on fatherlessness, and so I think if our politicians would spend a little bit more time on focusing on how to rebuild the family and really get families and parents, both father and mother, a little bit more engaged in their child's education, I think we would see a tremendous change. Matter of fact, there's a correlation between fatherlessness and mental health and all these other issues, youth suicide, youth in prison. I mean, the teenage pregnancy. I mean, the list goes on and on. Crime, all of that. There's a correlation there, and so I think it's worth us taking a look at and also encouraging that families should be together. Remember, family is the cornerstone of every civil society, and we cannot ignore that. And so I truly believe that we'll see a much brighter day and our kids will have a much brighter future if both parents are actively engaged and involved in raising them up.
Well, Minister Terris Todd, man, the time flew by, and this was so exciting and so engaging and informative. And I appreciate you carving out some time to share your story, and would love to continue again. But we're going to sign off for now. And where can people connect with you or buy your book?
Okay. Well, connecting with me on social media, well, here at the Heritage Foundation is Terris, Terris terris.todd@heritage.org. If they want to, connect with me here, social media, I'm on Facebook at Terris E. Todd. Or if they can go to terrisetodd.com, that is my webpage. But my book is actually on Amazon, and again, if they type in Just Being There, my book should probably pop up, and me being the author, but Just Being There, A Parent's Guide to Raising Children. The book is there, and they can actually get it there. So it was pretty cool because I had Kevin Hodge, the conservative twins. He sent me a text just the other day and said he just bought 2 copies of my book. So I was pretty happy about that. Like, I got the conservative twins, they bought 2 of my books.
Well,
So
they
that's
should
pretty
buy
cool.
2.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. But no, it's pretty good. I really thank God for it and blessing us to be able to get that message out. And hopefully and prayerfully it'll be a blessing to someone that just really are looking for solutions and ideas on raising kids. Being a parent doesn't come with a manual. And so hopefully there's a few tips in that book that could actually be a blessing to them, and their outcome could be a lot brighter.
Well, thank you so much for what you stand for and what you're fighting for, and representing us really well with these values. And so God bless you until next
Bless you.
time. All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.
You too.